Hey designers, have you ever felt overwhelmed by all of the different facets of a problem you're trying to solve? Or have you ever felt like there's just too much coming at you and you just can't make sense of it? Yeah, me too. One of the ways that we can deal with all of that is actually to visualize our thoughts, to get our ideas out of our head and into a medium or paper or some sort of format that we can interact with. In this video, I connected with Keith Tatum, visual thinker extraordinaire, and we talked about his process for being able to visualize your thoughts, get them out there to improve clarity and collaboration and innovation in the kinds of work that we do as designers. Let's jump right to that conversation. Keith, welcome. Introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you, Jonathan. Sure, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So I have been many things throughout my career. I started my journey in college studying illustration, and I never would have imagined that basic drawing skills would have kept me employed all these years, but it certainly has. It seems to have been part of the fabric of everything that I've done. But I've worked in design. A big portion of my career was focused on user experience. I cut my teeth in information architecture around 1999 when we were trying to figure out what the web was. And I never really stopped, I guess. And now, as I look back on my career, I've had the pleasure of enjoying lots of different roles: creative director, consultant, independent consultant, consultant working for very large organizations. And now I find myself teaching post-pandemic. So I am teaching user experience and digital design at the Modern College of Design. But I am a lifelong, passionate, visual thinker. I process the world around me visually, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Many designers and folks that fall into creative roles can relate, but I've really tried to maximize that. And today, our conversation, I really was excited to share the value of capturing our thoughts. Drawing and capturing your thoughts is a very vital part of the creative and design process, as you know, and as
Absolutely.
many others have probably figured out.
Yeah, and in the exploration and sort of the framing that I've done of design over the past few years, you know, uh, multiple people, multiple studies have been done. Just the more you can visualize and interact with your thoughts, the more you can
Mhm.
see them and externalize them, the more concrete they get, and the more you're able to actually really critique and evaluate them because it's hard to work in that abstract space all the time. So I was super excited to see a lot of your work watching all of what you've been putting out there. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I've seen the value of your work, the value of getting our thoughts externalized, getting our ideas captured in a medium, some sort of way of interacting with them in new ways. So, yeah, talk to me a little about the value of visual thinking. Why do we want to get these thoughts out? We've alluded to it, but tell me a little bit about your experience with that.
There's probably just a fundamental philosophy that lives inside of these ideas. When you're thinking about things, when you're processing ideas, when you're generating ideas, or even when you're not actively processing them, I'm sure we can all relate to the fact that our mind just races with all. It feels sometimes like you've got this movie playing inside your head, and sometimes you can't turn it off. Sometimes you can focus it and really see what's going on, and probably generate some really good ideas. But the way that I feel about it is, if you're having a conversation, and let's put it in the context of business, in consulting or design, or if you were part of an innovation team or a product team, it doesn't matter what the specific scenario is, but we often find ourselves in conversations, whether they're happening remotely or whether you're inside of a physical conference room with the screen up, projecting ideas that have been captured, or strategies or insights. We often find ourselves in deep conversations about these ideas that we're sharing, or the problems or design challenges that we're trying to solve. And that's great. It's fantastic to use conversation, I think, to explore the ideas and kind of check in with you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do I understand what you're saying? But the real magic happens when you start to capture those ideas and thoughts. If we were having this great conversation about something that we wanted to build together, and we're just doing this and talking, when that conversation is done, it's gone. I mean, you might still, you'll go back to your busy life or work that people are putting in front of you, or other problems that you might have to solve. But when you capture those thoughts and those ideas and make them tangible, they move from being abstract things that are floating around in our brains to something that's on a whiteboard or on a sketchbook or on an iPad, whatever your implement for scribing would be. Then we can really start rolling up our sleeves and do the hard work and evaluate it, be additive, subtractive. We can sketch things out to represent these ideas and move them from abstract concepts to metaphorical or more concrete ideas.
Yeah.
I wish I had figured this out much earlier in my career, but thank God I figured this out somewhere in the middle or part way. When you take the time to capture these ideas and these thoughts, not only are you able to negotiate them better with other human beings, but the other thing is you have a souvenir from that conversation that lives beyond the dialogue. And that means you have the opportunity to revisit those ideas whenever you pull up an image or a picture, or if it's a sketch that was done, you've got a physical, souvenir from that conversation, and you can crack it right back open. That's a lot harder to do inside your head when you don't have something to work with. So that's just the start. I mean, I believe, you can navigate not only ideas and solve problems, but you can invent things. You can identify things that are going on inside your mind, but you can process, right? That's the real value of getting things down on paper or on walls or on digital screens. If I'm a big fan now of using iPads and tablets and so forth. In fact, I'm probably doing that more than paper, but I still love scribing on paper and whiteboards. Yeah. There's some real magic. You can really connect more deeply with your own thoughts or thoughts of others when you're taking time to capture them.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is like we often think that a conversation is good enough, but what's interesting about a conversation is that we use words in different ways. We talk about things as if we both have a shared understanding of what we mean. But the problem is that we're still working in the abstract space.
That's right.
So until we make it concrete and get it outside of our brains and two people can look at the same artifact, then all of a sudden, no, that's not what I mean right there.
Exactly.
Then, like you're talking about, that's the magic that happens. That's where collaboration can really skyrocket, because we're looking at something we've brought form to. And that's one of the premises of design I've been operating under is designers bring form, right? We are formers, we're creators, we make things, and we do that, to get to an end result. And so, again, just watching your work, it was extremely encouraging to me because it's sort of bearing out that premise. It's making things visible. It's making things real. It's making them tangible. So then we can do the evaluative work. And one designer said, as soon as they're like drawing that line, it's like a conversation that begins to happen between them and the pen stroke. Like,
that's right.
Oh, that's not where I wanted that. Or, oh, that's not what I thought at first when I started to draw this. So yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Very, very cool.
Midpoint in my career, working as an information architect, my job was to help negotiate complex technology ideas with a diverse group of thinkers, whether they were my clients, my team members, software engineers, visual designers. And when you're making things like wireframes and concept sketches and storyboards, you are able to negotiate the most complex ideas and really bring them down to a simplified cave drawing level that has meaning for everybody that's involved in shaping those ideas. So yeah, I mean, whether you are an architect, an interior designer, an engineer, a user experience professional, whatever it might be, when you put pen or pencil to paper, you sharpen that conversation because now we have something real to talk about. And I love the example that you gave. We start getting into the, well, that's not how I saw it. And then I hand the marker or the pen, okay, well, show me what you're thinking. And even if someone is scribing a rectangle with a cloud and a couple of arrows and a squiggly line, at least they are invested in trying to help me understand the way that they are seeing things. And, that's just another example of how valuable it is.
So that's actually really interesting then, Keith, because what I'm hearing you say is that the ability for us as humans to work together is made more clear when we have that tangible artifact. We can collaborate better, we can work better, we can arrive at solutions, we can understand each other better. We have written languages based upon pen strokes and scribing. We have thousands and thousands of years of different languages that have all morphed and changed over time. We have art, we have pictures, we have all of these ways of expressing what's in our brains with tangible formed things. And it seems like a very great theme. So one of my questions is then moving like to the process part of this. How do we go about doing that efficiently and effectively? Because a lot of people are going to raise their hands and say, I'm not a great artist, or I can't draw, or some other reservation that they have. What is some of the ways, some of the tools, some of the approaches that you take and that you teach to help people start forming their thoughts inside of some sort of artifact that's actually tangible and interactable?
I'm a huge fan of reaching the people that don't have creative confidence in their drawing abilities. Most of my life, I have heard people that say, I couldn't draw a stick figure if my life depended on it. And, I would argue, yes, you can. And I've had lots of workshop experience over the years where I've seen all shapes and sizes, all types of thinkers that can make marks and much better than they give themselves credit for. And they all have meaning, right? Everyone who can write the alphabet knows how to draw pictures and construct more complex ideas. Let me talk about mind maps really quickly. And I'll give you a super quick overview. This was a way that I visualize this in a daily sketch habit that I have. The construct for a mind map is the easiest thing in the world to do. You start with a central topic and you brainwrite in a set amount of time. Usually 10 minutes or less is all our brain can handle. Some people, 5 minutes seems like an eternity when they're trying to explore their thoughts. But the construct is really simple. You start with your central topic. Usually I draw clouds in my mind maps because if anybody walks up on me and they see me making a mind map and they see these clouds, they can probably guess that my heads are sort of in the clouds, that I'm thinking about something. And so it's something that I've always used.
It's a nice visual cue.
Yeah, it's like, hey, my head is literally in the clouds right now. I'm thinking about something. And people might either say, hey, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. It looks like you're thinking about something. And it prevents you from looking slightly crazy if you're just filling a sketchbook full of thoughts and ideas that are scattered everywhere. It's a good structured format.
Great.
But I typically start with the topic front and center, like it's shown here. And I work sort of clockwork just because that's a way to do it. And I give myself a set amount of time. And you really are, I think it's better than brainstorming, because a lot of people fall into the trap of getting people together and say, hey, let's brainstorm. And there's a lot of people that are more introverted and need time to write things down and think it through. And I fall squarely in that category. I sort of am a part-time extrovert, and I can join a conversation like that, but I'd prefer to have a minute to focus and capture my thoughts.
It's a great organizational tool
Yeah.
because, whenever I've used mind mapping before, I wind up leaving and walking away, seeing a structure I didn't see before
Yes.
and finding relationships that weren't there before. And,
And
mind mapping is really powerful in that way when we think about visualizing and trying to make sense of that cloud that's sort of hanging over us in the middle of a design problem.
yeah, let me demystify it. The magic that's really happening is you get a big picture view of everything that you're thinking about. You can't do that in your own mind. You have to focus on an idea over here, and there's one over here, and they're not happening. They're not simultaneous. You can't evaluate them. You've got to process them. When you create a mind map, you lay out the playbook in front of you of all the things that you're thinking about, and you can start to connect ideas that you would never see, because you can't see what's inside your head, and you have to get it out. So, bringing it to life down below in these examples, if I were to mind map bands that I love, and these are in no particular order, I just started capturing them. I grew up in the 80s, so a lot of bands like New Order and The Cure and Hall & Oates and all these other bands that the younger kids probably have little context for who they are, but right? And that's just the start of that conversation. Now the bands that I love, and you might look at my mind map and say, well, did you ever go to any of those concerts? See, it's unlimited with the conversations that you can have, because now you have a wealth of ideas on the table to consider and connect, and then down in the bottom right corner, where do I create these mind maps? It's kind of meta, but like, there's all the tools that I use: Procreate, Mural, Fresco, the Photoshop app, Jamboard, on paper, on index cards, on Post-it notes, in field notes journals, whiteboards, right? Look at the conversation I just started that you're like excited to jump into, because you're like, ooh, I'll grab a hold of that one. Yep. I draw on the whiteboard too. And then we get to this really amazing place where we've created opportunities for, probably 10 different conversations. So that's the construct. But let me give you a little backstory real quick. This is me being vulnerable. So here's when I discovered mind maps. As a young man, I lost my dad in my early 20s. And, that was definitely an example of a traumatic event that we all experience in our lives. And here's the thing, just like many other people in the world, I did a great job of bottling all of that thought and feeling and emotion up inside me for a couple of years. Well, a couple of years after my dad passed away, I was working at a small agency, and I was assigned a redesign project for the American Cancer Society. And I was taking inventory of all these stories that people were sharing about the loss of people, that were in their lives, where they were, family members or friends or whatever. And as you can imagine, I'm no stronger than anyone else. I kind of lost it right there on the job. I mean, I fell apart, and I went in and talked to my creative director about what was going on. And fortunately, she was kind enough. She said, just get out of here. Don't worry about work, go deal with some of this, because, obviously it was too much. Well, fast forward, I found myself, sort of at a park in central Ohio. The only thing I had with me, thank God, was my sketchbook sitting next to me in the front seat of the car. And for whatever reason, I just started capturing all of these real things that I was feeling, but didn't realize were really going on with me.
Hmm.
So, it's not just about navigating innovative ideas and brainstorming cool things to do this weekend. You can literally get more deeply connected to what's going on inside of you, the things that you can't see. So there's
Hmm.
real value, I have learned. Now, I didn't know that at the time. It took me many years later, stumbling back across this sketch that I made as a young man, to piece this together, right?
Yep.
So, that to me is another example of the value of really capturing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Uh,
You know,
I'm sure any good therapist would say, write some of this stuff down that you're dealing with. But how
yeah,
many of us really do that,
yeah,
right? Whether you're writing it out in a journal, that's still kind of mapping out what's in your mind. I just happen to have spent most of my adult life figuring out, experimenting with different ways to visualize the things that I'm thinking about.
absolutely. Yeah. And it takes, almost, it takes a level of humility to admit that I can't sort it out all up here.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
I
Our
need, I
ego
need,
says, "You got this. You don't need, you don't need to waste your time getting this down on paper." And the
yeah,
reality is very different. Like we
yeah.
we we crush ourselves,
Mhm.
particularly given the year that we had last year. Think of all the things, that new thoughts and ideas that we all struggled with. And I squirreled away and started capturing some of this stuff just to get it out of my head.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great example of, when we're dealing with a lot of information, and designers by definition often deal with a lot of information. Like, we're not just dealing with a problem, but we're also dealing with the way that we express that problem in the medium, whatever constraint, environmental or whatever they might be. It starts to show the reason why thinking visually, getting thoughts out, putting them on paper in some sort of really rough, crude, lightweight, cheap expression allows us then to think more clearly. And it's not I have this like idea of like, somebody carrying giant buckets of information.
Mhm.
If these information is Legos and you dump them out on the table, now all of a sudden you can actually see the pieces that are at play.
That's
You
a
can actually
great
begin to
metaphor.
create them and put them together in new ways, which is really part of the power of design, is being able to see what's at play and start
Mhm.
working with it. So
Yeah, I love
yeah.
that metaphor because that's what it feels like to me. And the interesting, if I play off of that for a second, the interesting thing that happens when you're trying to collaborate with others is they've got buckets of Legos too. And so you're working with more than what you came to the party with, right? Now
Yeah.
all of a sudden I've got lime green and fluorescent yellow Lego pieces to work with. And when until you until I captured some of that to see that that's what you had in your bucket, I never would have had the opportunity to, to build a banana out of Legos because I didn't have the yellow. I don't know if the metaphor works, but you can see
It's
where I'm
good.
going. So,
Awesome.
real quick, some other things that go along with this, right? It isn't just about mind maps. There's some other space where you're visualizing things. Doodling is overrated because, if you've got a pad of paper while you're listening to somebody talk, whether it's a conference or you're in a meeting and you find yourself drawing daisies in the corner of a legal pad, there's something else magical happening there, right? You're giving your it actually is your brain is focusing and you're actively listening. But
Hmm.
some people like to explore their ideas in lists.
Hmm.
My wife is a quintessential list maker and loves the value of crossing those things off. And I think that is a tangible activity that people should continue to do. Certainly any type of brainwriting activity where you're scribing on post-it notes, index cards, you're taking time as a constraint and writing down ideas and then sharing them is super valuable. It's so much better than verbal brainstorming with a group
Hmm.
that is or isn't comfortable. We
Hmm.
talked about mind maps, diagramming, making sense, visual explanations. These things are all ways of doing some visual storytelling. But the thing that I remind people is we're negotiating ideas. If you like anything that I create and you think it's creative and artistic and you're like, oh, I'd like to have a print of that, that's magical. But at the heart of it, these are just my ideas. It's not artwork. It's not precious. It's not meant to be framed. That doesn't mean you can't format your ideas and your thoughts. And many people are great at doing that, you know, storyboard artists, visual thinkers, people that work with information diagramming and visualizing data and information. But, you know, there's a whole wealth, a well, even I would say, of things that you can dip your bucket down into whenever you need to capture your thoughts or explore your ideas. And these are
That's
just
great.
some of the things that I experiment with.
Yeah.
I've test driven plenty of things that don't stick, right? There's lots of methods and techniques and activities that you can go through. And I've tried them and they're like, man, it's too wordy. I'd rather see more pictures or, you know, something of that nature.
Keith, this is great. I appreciate so much you just sharing really the rawness of what you've been up to, how you thought about visual communication, visual experimentation, visual thinking. Anybody who's watching this, anyone who is about to walk away from this, you know, if there's one thing that I have been learning, and it seems like you've been learning this too, is that it's a regular discipline that we should be doing as designers, as human beings, is getting our ideas outside of our head, not just sitting and stewing on them. That's helpful at times, but it's very, very beneficial to get it out into a form where we can actually look at it and evaluate it without the cloud of difficulties, the cloud of confusion that kind of like can be in our brain when we're trying to manage a lot of things.
These things are fleeting. Whether you're trying to solve a problem, innovate, you know, come out with that next feature or a next breakthrough design adjustment, or you're just trying to stay sane in your day because you're dealing with a lot of overwhelming things. When you capture those thoughts, you can evaluate them. You can make sense of them. And the thing that I found really valuable is that you can share them, right? Now I have something that I can share with you, and I may need feedback. I may want to make a connection with you. There are many valuable reasons for sharing, but they come and go so quickly, right?
Absolutely do.
You never know where a spark of a thought might come back to you and turn into something really amazing.
Keith, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people connect with you? Where can they find you?
Sure. Yeah. So I have examples of work up on visibilityexperiments.com, but I throw a lot of the raw experiments out on Instagram. So I'm at visibility_experiments, kind of a weird one to type in, but you could probably find it pretty quickly. That's the easiest way to kind of see what I'm up to.
I really appreciate your time. Super valuable. I hope anybody watching this has gotten some value from it. I'm so thankful that Keith was able to jump in and to join and to hang out for a while and just chat about visual thinking. I know that I learned a lot. I hope that you learned a lot too. Go check out Keith on Instagram. You can find him on LinkedIn as well. Keith is really doing a great job explaining and showing how visual thinking has a lot of power and a lot of capability when it comes to visualizing our thoughts and communicating more clearly. Thanks for watching today. If you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well to get more content as it comes out. I've got more conversations with people lined up, plenty of more videos planned, and I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to help you improve your design and creative abilities. Thanks for watching. Go make something awesome.